I know people are beginning to join us in this session, and we'll just wait a minute to get started until everyone has a chance to get in the Zoom room. We have a good audience today. Okay, why don't we get started? Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name's Jim Rooney. I'm President and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, and on behalf of the Chamber and all of our members and staff, we hope you're joining us feeling safe and healthy today. I want to thank you for joining us for this Doing Business with Eastern Bank series event, a series that we launched here at the Chamber in 2020. And before I get into some of the details of that, I do want to say that this particular event is very special to me, to the Chamber, and to the program, and to the community at large. And that's because I think it's fair to say that without Eastern Bank and the leadership of Bob Rivers, there would be no Pacesetters program. I just want to put it as simply as that. 3 or 4 years ago, Bob came to me and we talked a lot about the need for connecting the Chamber and the business community with small businesses owned by people of color and doing a better job at doing that. And I won't bore you with all the details, but out of that came a program called Pacesetters. So I do want to say that, our relationship with Eastern Bank, their support for not only this program, but for so many initiatives here at the Chamber that address issues of economic opportunity. And I know many of on this call know that on so many issues in Boston, Greater Boston, and Massachusetts, Eastern Bank leadership on those issues is unparalleled. So thank you, Bob Rivers. Thank you, Quincy Miller. Thank you, Eastern Bank, for that leadership. With respect to the Doing Business With series, we launched this, as I said, earlier this year. And it really was in response to the feedback we heard from businesses owned by people of color who expressed that sometimes they really can't figure out exactly, how to do business with some of the larger institutions in the Greater Boston and Massachusetts area. We know that industries approach procurement differently. We know that even individual businesses within industries approach procurement differently. So how do I know how they do it? Is there pre-qualifications? What kinds of products and services do they buy? These were all the questions that were somewhat of a mystery. So Doing Business With is an attempt to try to demystify and have a conversation between the Pacesetter companies like Eastern Bank and the potential business partners that are joining us on this call. We recently announced the statewide expansion of the Pacesetters program to broaden our commitment to diverse purchasing on the part of the business community. We're very excited about that. Pacesetter companies that join have an opportunity to be part of a diverse collective of business leaders that have signed up to create systemic opportunity, utilizing their purchasing power and creating a more equitable Commonwealth. So that's what it's all about, and it's needed more now than ever. I'm proud of the commitment to action that these Pacesetter companies like Eastern Bank are making throughout the Commonwealth, and I invite others to join us on this journey of, as I said, creating systemic opportunity. A few program notes that I want to share. I did mention already that Eastern Bank is our primary sponsor for the Pacesetters program, but they are joined in sponsoring today's program by John Hancock. So we thank them as well for their leadership in this arena. I also want to flag that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the Chamber's YouTube page shortly after the presentation. Finally, be sure to submit your questions through the Q&A feature, making sure to send to all panelists, or you can email questions to chamberprograms@bostonchamber.com. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers today from Eastern Bank, starting with my friend Quincy Miller, President and Vice Chairman of Eastern Bank. I'm sure Quincy will give you more background, but Eastern Bank, the largest and oldest mutual bank in the United States, with over $10 billion in assets and over 120 banking and insurance locations, serving communities in Eastern Massachusetts and Southern and Coastal New Hampshire. So that gives you a sense of Quincy's breadth of responsibility. He spends his time focused on helping lead the overall strategic direction of Eastern Bank, which has served its customers, as I said, for nearly 200 years. Quincy hasn't served them for 200 years, but Eastern Bank has. Quincy has a passion for supporting the communities he lives in. He's the past board chair of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, serves on the board of directors of the Greater Boston Food Bank, Bottom Line, the Alliance for Business Leadership, Zoo New England, Greater Boston YMCA Board of Overseers, and is a C-suite member of the partnership. Quincy, I don't know where and how you do it all. Strong advocate for our Pacesetters program, and we're grateful for his leadership on this issue. Next, we're joined by Tom Dunn. Tom is Senior Vice President and Director of General Services and Facilities at Eastern Bank. Tom brings more than 35 years of experience in corporate administration to the table. He's responsible for Eastern Bank's corporate real estate, facilities, security, purchasing, mail operations, and records retention for Eastern Bank's portfolio. So I'm sure that Tom will be able to speak about some of the opportunities that exist in doing business with Eastern Bank. And he does that for all 120 facilities that the bank operates. Led by Tom's leadership, these facilities include the company's corporate headquarters, operations centers, and retail banking centers. In addition, Tom oversees facilities at Eastern Bank subsidiary Eastern Insurance, including all of its offices and operations centers. Tom's work to develop and expand the impact of Eastern's sustainability and supplier diversity programs. And he's going to share today how the bank and its partners set goals for their purchasing needs. So we want to thank Tom for joining us. And finally, we're pleased to welcome Rafal Jablonka, Associate Vice Lowell. Go you may. Rafal has dedicated his career to the bank.
And as you'll see from the slides in a few minutes, our supplier diversity commitment goes back even further. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Well, as that comes up, as Jim shared, we are Eastern's a community bank, and we're committed to the community. We're committed to helping our communities grow and thrive. One of the ways that we do that is through efforts on the philanthropy side, like the Foundation for Business Equity. The other is our commitment to small businesses overall. And as you can see here, The bank has been the #1 SBA lender in New England we just won again. So I'm thinking we're I think we're at 11 years now across New England and 12 years across Massachusetts. And through the Paycheck Protection Program, we are one of the leaders, quite frankly, with over 8,000 PPP loans. And for many of our businesses on the line, probably all of our businesses on the line, the next round of PPP, so this is just a little plug, Draw 2 is starting this week at the smaller CDFIs, and we believe that we'll start with the rest of the larger financial institutions, really any financial institution over $1 billion, which is many of us here in the state. We believe that process will begin early next week. So just want to put that plug in there for the opportunity to take advantage of that. But this commitment is really about fostering economic mobility, particularly within our Black and brown communities. And that starts with small businesses and businesses of color who can create meaningful wage-sustaining jobs and to help their communities grow. And so next slide, please. As I mentioned, our history really goes back in terms of our commitment to supplier diversity. Back as far, I think the official program would have started in 2010, and we've continued to grow and expand that. If we can just go to the next slide. Through that commitment, we have been focused on how do we make sure that we are welcoming to be able to support businesses and women and minority-owned businesses here at Eastern Bank. And over the last decade, we've worked to refine that and grow that. Particularly about 3 years, maybe 4 years ago now, we wanted to really up that commitment as Pacesetters was coming about. And so we made a number of key advancements in terms of how we support our businesses of color, Bea, and our women-owned businesses. I just want to make sure the slides are advancing on your end.
Hey, Bea, Quincy, Bea's computer apparently crashed. So
oh, okay. So okay, perfect. I was worried, Jim, that I was the one that was frozen and didn't know it.
No.
Okay, so I don't need the slides. I'll just talk to them. So as I said, our history goes back to 2010, but over the last really 4 years, we've worked to make it easier for our diverse businesses to reach out to Eastern, to do business with Eastern. And Tom and Rafal are going to talk through the ways that we've been able to do that. We set goals for our businesses and all of our business units. So when we talk about supplier diversity here at Eastern, it's not just about the purchasing teams or the purchasing managers or Tom Dunn's team. It's about individual departments from human resources to marketing to branches, et cetera. And so through that work, and I think the real key piece is the 3 guiding principles that I've really come to ask and hold our company accountable to. And as people ask Eastern and they ask me about what do you really need to do to drive greater supplier diversity in your company, I think there's 3 principles. And those 3 principles really attack what has been the responsibility of purchasing in corporations, particularly large corporations, for generations. So without breaking down those barriers, you can't drive meaningful change. And those barriers, if you think about supporting the types of businesses who are on the phone here today, it's one, the corporations have been focused on getting the lowest price. 2, they've been focused on creating larger contracts with less vendors. And 3, doing business with people who they know because inherently they feel it's less risky. They know the outcome. And so at Eastern, we've really flipped that on its head. And so from the top of the house, together with Bob Rivers, all of our purchasing managers and Tom Dunn and Rafal helped drive this conversation. They've heard us say, we are willing to break up our large contracts in order to make sure that we support WMBEs who may not have the scale to be able to serve, for example, 120 locations across our footprint. So that's number 1 principle, willing to break up these large contracts to create opportunities. Number 2 is willing to sacrifice savings to create opportunities for WMBEs. Now, as you would expect, there's always a competitive process and a competitive bid process, But this is not about accepting the lowest bid, or it's not about, accepting a bid simply because, the larger company has greater economies of scale. But we are willing to spend more to be able to support this mission because it's critical to the overall success and health of our communities. And at the end of the day, that incremental spend is not as important as supporting the community. And third and final is risk taking. And when I mean risk is doing business with people who you haven't done business with before, being willing to give a chance to a business that is growing, that has, creating scale, but that you don't know. And in fact, we reward our colleagues for doing so. And as I told them, listen, if something goes wrong, as goes wrong in other contracts, so be it. I'm happy that you took the time to be able to make sure you are helping to support a WMBE. So I just wanted to kick off this to share those guiding principles. And Tom, I'm not sure if the slides will be up for you, but now let me turn it over to Tom Dunn to talk about some of our procurement goals.
Great. Thank you, Quincy. And thank you, everybody, for being here this afternoon. My name is Tom Dunn, Director of General Services, as earlier introduced. And as Quincy was discussing, we have a myriad of goals at Eastern Bank around procurement and our procurement strategies. Those are macro goals, and as Quincy mentioned, divisional goals. So I'm going to start talking first about some of those macro goals. What are the strategies?
Tom, the slides are up, so if you want to tell us what slide to go to, we'll...
Okay, keep moving to the one that says our procurement goals. There we are. All right, so and as I mentioned, these are what we have listed here are some of the macro goals, some of those goals that both Bob and Quincy have not only helped us define, but enforce and support throughout the company. And having that top-down support is critical to success. So first and foremost, I report to the CFO. So, Jim Fitzgerald makes sure that everything is cost-effective. That is priority one. We have a fiduciary responsibility. We take it very seriously, and we want to have cost-effective operations. We're committed, clearly committed to sustainable, social responsibility and sustainable efforts, the environment and how we act in the community, as well as, our impact on the environment in our community. That's always considered in what we're doing. Whenever we're dealing with vendor partners, we're impartial. Our goal is to be fair, ethical, and give everybody a level playing field. That is key among all our efforts. As Quincy mentioned, our goal, really, the primary goal is to achieve value. And what value is for Eastern Bank is not always the lowest price. It is what has the best impact for Eastern Bank as a company, but also the communities we serve, because without those communities, there's no value to us. So we're careful to measure the best value, not necessarily lowest price. Compliance to our policies. We obviously have some relatively strict policies and procedures that we need to follow, both on a regulatory and company-wide basis. We do have to adhere to those, and I'll be talking to some of those in upcoming slides in the requirements that we have of our vendors. So when you think about policies, it's not only what procurement has to adhere to, but what we have to have our vendors comply to. Again, we need to manage risk. While we do take chances and we're encouraged to take risk, we have to measure that risk and manage it through all the stages of procurement, from onboarding through contract execution. So we take a very deliberate, that's a very deliberate process, and we take that very seriously, and we ask our vendors to adhere to quite a few different regulations and protocols. We do we use strategic procurement practices, again, promoting those partnership opportunities, and partnerships are important to us. It's very important that we're not just shopping price and executing a contract for the next year or so. We do take a longer term view of this. Our contracts are typically it's a 5-year contract. 3 years is what we like to do, is have 3 years and then review it after 3. If there's no reason to terminate it, we'll extend it. So, there are different length contracts, but that's typically how we like to do business. Build a relationship, prove that relationship out, and that's with a little bit of give and take, and then measure it and renew it if we think there's still value in it. So I will, those are some of our macro goals. As we've talked about, we also set goals from a supplier diversity position within our divisions and our departments. Quincy's pulled together and supported a team of subject matter experts representing each of the divisions, so they know where they are in with these in promoting business with suppliers, diverse suppliers and small businesses, which is key to us. So next slide. I spoke a little bit about some of the requirements that we do have, and being a customer is not one of those requirements. I don't want you to think that, but we do value our customers, and that's always a balance. Working with our customers, working with diverse suppliers, and there are a lot of different considerations that go into our buy decisions. But customers and having, again, our business is a relationship business, and we take that very seriously and are committed to it. The areas that we're typically seeing the most traffic in or the most interest is operational. It's facility services, food services, couriers, but also technology and recruiting, staffing and in some of the consulting areas, contract consulting, as well as marketing. Both printing and fulfillment are areas that we find a lot of. So we receive inquiries, and Rafal's going to be talking about that process as well. But one of our goals is to respond to every inquiry we get. And if we're not doing that, we want to hear about it. Rafal will talk about the process, but just as an overview, we do have a portal. We ask you to register with us. And the main reason for that is so that we can be responsive and we can be accountable to those that have taken their time to inquire with us. And we owe you a response. That response isn't always what you want to hear. Sometimes contracts are in place. We'll let you know that. And we'll let you know when those contracts are due to expire as well, to give you an opportunity to bid on them. When we do provide those opportunities to bid, or if you are awarded a contract, we have insurance requirements that we'll share with you. All contracts go through a very strict legal review, and we often have comments and regulations that we have to follow from our legal team. And we'll very often do a financial review of our suppliers. We need to know that our suppliers are strong and can support what we're trying to do, and we take great lengths to ensure that. So there will be things that we'll ask of you. If we could go to the next slide. Talk a little bit about opportunities. We support a lot of our assistants. We have minority businesses are identified working with the different departments. So as I mentioned, facilities and products and services, typically a lot of that activity is around promotional items and gifts. We have subject matter experts in each department, so that when we receive a request through the portal, we refer that to the subject matter expert. Quite often, as some folks know, you get an inquiry, people are busy, and they'll say, no, we're all set. We have a supplier for that service. We push a little bit harder. We actually have folks in the department who will say, well, wait a minute, when's that contract coming up? Let's provide a meaningful response to this inquiry. Let them know if we're not going to entertain them, why are we not going to entertain them? when we do, it's typically for a new or existing contract that has come up for renewal. I mentioned, contracts are typically a 3 to 5 year duration. We track contract dates. It's one of the things that we do. So we know, we can forecast which contracts are coming up, when they're coming up, and who we're going to be seeking for vendor partners or opening up to bids. And we share that information. If we know, if a department is under contract, our typical response is, well, it's under contract, but that'll come up in 2 years, so call us back. And we do have a purchasing policy that includes competitive bidding of all services, as well as the inclusion of minority businesses in those RFPs and those bids. So that's part of policy at Eastern Bank. We work with diverse suppliers and employ sustainable business practices. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Rafal to give you a little bit of insight into the specific process and more of the nuts and bolts on how to do business with Eastern Bank.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. As Tom mentioned, my name is Rafal Jablonka, and I'm the procurement officer at Eastern Bank. I oversee and coordinate the supplier diversity program. One of my responsibilities is to administer the supplier registration process, which I will be presenting in the next few slides. The process starts with completing the supplier registration form, which can be found at supplierregistration.easternbank.com, or by visiting Eastern Bank homepage and searching by using the keywords supplier registration. And if you don't remember anything from this presentation, just remember that link or how to get to that link, because from there we'll hold your hand through the whole process. When you find the link in the search, you'll be warned that you're going outside to our outside vendor. So just click and continue. It's a safe connection. Our outside vendor is called Viva, and the product that they offer, the portal that we use, is called STARS. The process begins when you create an account, and it will provide you with a username and password. After you receive a welcome email with your credentials, you will need to log in one more time and complete the registration process. During that process, you will be asked to describe your expertise and capabilities. And here is one word of advice. Please focus on core expertise. So when the subject matter expert, or SME as we call it, receive your registration, it is clear to them what service or product you provide. If there is any ambiguity as to who is the SME, your registration will be reviewed by the administrator and then forwarded to the appropriate SME. So I just want you not to worry if there's something that's not clear. You're still going to be reviewed and forwarded to the right SME. Next slide, please. So the next step is the departmental review, in which SME will evaluate your capabilities and match them to the current or future needs. If SME identifies any immediate opportunities, she or he will contact you regarding your required documentation. And I will talk about the documentation later. If there are no immediate needs, the SME will defer you for future projects. So for example, as Tom mentioned, if we currently under a contract with another vendor, you might be invited to the bidding process when the contract is up for renewal. And if the services or products that you provide are not comparable with Eastern Bank needs, the SME will decline your registration and let you know. So you are aware of what's going on and we don't waste your time. Next slide, please. So here is the list of required documents that I referred to earlier. Request for information, a request for proposal, request for quotation, non-disclosure agreement that outlines the confidential materials and knowledge or information, and the code of conduct, which outlines the responsibilities of proper practices between parties. And then COI, which is the certificate of insurance that states the insurance coverage that we require. Next slide, please. So if you are awarded a contract, so now I'm moving you past all these steps, and when you are awarded a contract, the onboarding process will start. And the onboarding is our internal process of evaluating vendors and their services by various departments in the bank. So it starts with the new initiative process, it's called, and during that process, the new initiative owner, who is the relationship manager, will work with departments in the bank and the vendor to complete risk assessment. The departments usually involved in this review are accounts payable, technology, operational risk, and that process takes some time, right? Depending on how much risk is involved. After the NI process is completed, the new initiative, we call it NI, is completed, then the contract can be signed. I guess you can open up the campaign battle and we start the project. Next slide, please. So this slide lists the departments that provide the most areas of opportunities, and Tom already touched upon it. So if you are a company that provides recruiting and talent management, benefits, compensation, payroll services, your registration will be reviewed by SME from HR. If you represent constructions and trades, it will go to general services SME or facilities SME, and so forth. Technology will look for partners for various projects, marketing for companies providing printing and communication services. But these are not all the departments. As Tom mentioned, we have some ad hoc requests from departments. So for example, last week, Market Risk Management Department emailed me to help them find a minority vendor that would assist them in model risk of validation testing. So these type of requests come up from time to time. So I encourage you to register, and hopefully the right opportunity will come along. That completes my presentation. So as I said, if anything, just remember that link. And we just switched to the new portal. So if there are any issues, be patient, but we did a test drive and everything works fine and looks fine. So at this time, I'm turning back to Bea for the questions and discussion session.
Okay, I think I'm going to take that. Rafal, Quincy, Tom, thank you so much for such an informative presentation. And we'll get that, before we leave, we'll get that slide back up with the portal address on it so everyone can make sure they get it. But while we're on that, just to follow up, because I know that part of the effort of these sessions is to make sure people understand the ways of doing business. And I want to just probe that portal a little bit more. You mentioned, Rafal, the review of the information that people put in and seeing, if there's opportunities now or later. Is that in a form of almost pre-qualification? There was one slide about insurance, legal, and financial requirements. Do you kind of look at all of those during that process so that people, when it does come time to bid, you have a sense that they're kind of lined up okay?
Well, the first thing is the capabilities and expertise. That's where it starts. So if they're comparable and there is opportunity, we will work with them to make all the rest happen.
Okay.
So they should not be afraid that the coverage is not enough or the contract is not written the right way. We will work with our legal department and whoever they have to help them out during the process.
Yeah, I mean, that's important. In fact, we have a question in the queue already about on those issues of contracts and insurance requirements and financials. We're dealing with small businesses here. So, the ability to go get a law firm to review
No.
fine print in a contract. You
I
know,
realize it sounded a little bit maybe intimidating with the
yeah,
volume of information, but it really, if you start with the registration, will hold your hand through the whole process.
And
yeah,
I think, Jim, it's important to note that those contracts are as sophisticated or as relatively basic as whomever the supplier is that wants to provide it. We're simply reviewing it and making sure that it's inclusive of any requirements we have, and we'll work with them to outline those.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think, Jim, I just echo. I mean, I think, if you're talking about a $500,000, $1 million, or $100,000 project, those typically have contracts with them. But there's a lot of spend that we do. That's $1,000 here, $5,000 there. There's no massive contract for them. The portal also helps us as we're working with, literally colleagues across multiple departments, and they're looking for diverse suppliers. Tom and Rafal can be the funnel to say, okay, you want to buy X, Y, or Z. Here are the companies that we have who have reached out around those products and services. So that's one of the important connections for the portal.
Yeah, and I'm going to take the opportunity to introduce another commercial message on a program that Eastern Bank and Bob Rivers and I are involved in, and it's a small business strong program. And that program enables small businesses to get pro bono help. So to the extent that, you're in that situation where either with Eastern Bank or someone else, there's a legal contract that you're being asked to review, you can sign up for Small Business Strong and get a lot of pro bono services over there in a number of different arenas, but legal is clearly one of them. So in this case, either Eastern Bank will work with you to figure out sort of the legal language issues and provide services, or I'd say take a look at Small Business Strong. Just a couple other questions about sort of process during some of these sessions involving, geographically spread out, not national, but even regional companies. We mentioned in the introduction that you all have 120 locations, kind of Massachusetts and other New England states. So are some of the contracts done at the more local level? I'm thinking facilities maintenance and management versus for the whole Eastern Bank portfolio. How does that work?
Quite often, Jim, what we'll do is depending on the service, and janitorial being one of them, we'll typically look for two providers, and sometimes geography, if it's we might have a separate provider, a smaller provider out on the Cape. But we typically like to do business with more than one person, so all our eggs aren't in one basket. As well as scale, we realize that not everybody has the scale to service that. So whenever required, we can peel off or might find a piece of the contract that's a better fit for somebody we want to try to work with.
Okay. Great. Questions are coming in. You mentioned the new portal. So we have a vendor who was registered in 2018 and awarded a contract apparently. If people are in the old portal, do they have to register in the new portal? And does their time in there expire? Once they're in, they're in.
Rafal, you want to?
Yes, so I highly encourage everyone to register again. Unfortunately, we couldn't transfer all the data from the old portal. So I was thinking of even being proactive and sending emails to these people who registered to register again. But yes, please register again. And that in that portal, you will stay for quite a while. I think if you declined for our services, then what's the status. This portal also required, which it's worth mentioning, certifications. So in this process that looked kind of intimidating, the good news is that we don't require certification. If you self-certified yourself, and there will be in the portal box for that, we'll accept that.
Okay.
Just to make it even more minority-friendly, environment.
Yeah, I want to call that out, Jim, because that was another one of the challenges as I talk to small businesses, and I know the state's doing a lot of good work to simplify the certification process, but I 3 years ago, we said, we're not going to require that to be able to do a contract with us. It's a self-certification, and that will make it easier on the businesses.
Right. You're being very diplomatic, Quincy.
We trust.
So a question about, and it came in here, an MBE supplier who may register in the portal, but there's not an open opportunity, today. Will you engage with them? Will you meet with them to sort of get to know them, maybe for future reasons, or that's one of our questions that we have from a guest.
I would tell you, it's difficult because time is a premium. And if we really don't have an opportunity, quite often it's difficult it's not the best use, quite honestly, of their time or ours if there really is nothing available. But what we do is we save those, all that information in the portal. And when the subject matter experts in each division are looking for a supplier, we go back into the database, and Rafal will give those names and refer those contacts to then have those meetings and talk to them.
Yeah. And just to add to Tom's comment, we really qualified. If there's an opportunity for your business in the future, we will mark you as a qualified business. Yeah. The only reason you can be disqualified if you are selling, hospital beds or helicopters. I mean, we are not in that line of business. So if there's a future opportunity, we'll mark you as a qualified. And as Tom mentioned, if someone is looking for a minority vendor from 2 years from now, I will go to that list and go through that list to provide that vendor.
Okay. So let me interpret the question a little, maybe press you a little. So if I'm out there, I'm a vendor, I have a solution for you. I have, I've got an idea that you just need to listen to, and I did the portal and there's no opportunities available. Should I call you, Quincy? I mean, what should I do? I really think you need to listen to me.
Yeah. So I think Tom was being sort of very political there, right? Look, we have conversations with, businesses who are looking to do business with us. I don't think that's what Tom was meaning, that we won't have those conversations. We can't have 1,000, right? If we get 1,000 people send an email through and say, we'd like to talk about XYZ, and there's none of those opportunities available in the foreseeable future, then that becomes very hard. But I think the other context is, when we talk about no opportunities available, we mean, as we think about, if let's use, for example, I'm going to use Tom's janitorial service example. Well, if we just signed the contract, you're looking for janitorial services, and the contract's a 5-year contract, then again, there's going to be a while before we have a conversation. But if you're in food service and you're looking to, contract with catering and so forth, well, we have that going on all the time. So there's going to be an opportunity there to connect you with different businesses. Hopefully that gives a little context.
Yeah, great. So there's a question in here, and I think it's as much for me as it is for you, Quincy, but the question is, what data have you seen that informs the scale and scope of work required to level the playing field for MBE, WBE firms? Any specific disparity studies or your own internal metrics? Do you want to take a stab at that, Quincy?
Yeah, well, I guess what I would say is that question there is an entire Zoom on and of itself, right? But the crux of the question, what is required to level the playing field? Well, it's this conversation we're having right here. It's about creating opportunities for businesses who are working to create their own capacity. And we can't continue to live in this chicken and egg conversation, right? The chicken and egg conversation is, well, I'm not big enough to get any of these contracts. And what you tell me is I have to be bigger to win the contract. So I never get any opportunities. That's what the Pacesetters program is all about. And bringing companies like Eastern to the table to say, you have to create these opportunities for contracts so that these businesses can scale, and then support them in their growth and their development. So I think that's sort of the first key piece of this. There's countless disparity studies out there that says that, the scale and the size and the investment in small businesses, particularly of color and women-owned businesses, as compared to other large businesses. But I think, again, as I said, that's what this program is really all about.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that, yes, there are studies and we've participated in them. I think there's several bottom lines, regardless of what the specific numbers say, that businesses of color are not participating enough in business and commerce generally. Government's not doing enough spending with businesses of color generally. The metrics of those are somewhere down in the 2-3% of total purchasing in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for both business and government, by the way, not just picking on government here. So, I don't think we need to sort of study the problem much more. And then the question is about sort of interventions and what do you do about it? And it's, you have to be intentional. And I would echo what Quincy said, the whole idea of Pacesetters is to turn or to try to reinvent systems that are grounded in, I guess at best, systemic inequality, at worst, systemic racism, and turn them into systemic opportunity. That's kind of what we're all about. But whoever asked the question, I think, either us or I'm sure Quincy would be happy to follow up on what some of those studies look like. I do want to probe, Tom, you made some great points around the procurement process focusing on value. And I want to dive into that word a little bit, if you'll indulge me, and sort of what it means. And if I'm a small business and, I know I'm competing and I may not have the cost advantages of some of my competitors, but, I know I can deliver for you. What is it that is value? I mean, how do I demonstrate that I'm the guy, that has the value you're looking for, and I may be a couple of percentage points higher than my competitor, but I'm going to give you the value. Tell me what that word will mean.
I think first and foremost, Jim, it's a level of service that, we look for. When we say partner, we really mean partner. We want somebody who's going to come in and work with us, deliver what they say they're going to deliver, but also take a look at what we're doing, because the customer's not always right. And adding value to us is saying, hey, Tom, this is the way you're doing something, and it really doesn't make good sense. Would you ever think of trying it this way? That's added value. That, changing the way we work, oftentimes finding those efficiencies and making us better is really what we look for from service providers. And we find it all the time.
Yeah. I love your word choices, even that word partnerships, and, sometimes vendor or supplier relationships are just, deliver X number of these every Monday, or, just do this task. Can you expand on that word as well, partnership? I know that if you have a supplier and you have a vested interest in their success, you want them to be there for you. You want them to grow, succeed, so that, you can have that continuing relationship. So how do you amplify just that, buyer-supplier relationship into partnership?
I think one of the best examples I have is our fulfillment company, Winbrook. We've been doing business with them. I've been with Eastern Bank for 17 years, and we've always been working with them. The reason for that is they've continuously challenged us, and we've continuously challenged them to do things better or differently. Recently brought on Windwalker Security Services. It's been a great relationship. We've challenged them quite a bit to provide a service that we're looking for, not just out of the box. This is what we're trying to do, and add value. We know you can guard our buildings, but can you make badges? Can you make security badges? Because if you're sitting at the desk and that's downtime, and you can use that time to make security badges, you're also saving us some time. And it's that type of relationship that really adds value.
Yeah, and I'm guessing Herbie answered that question the right way.
He did. Yeah, no, it's been great.
Yeah. We have another question in the chat here. A lot of MBEs are in hospitality, food and beverage that are hurting these days. Any opportunities on the short-term horizon later in the year that people should wait for? I think, Quincy, you mentioned that's kind of an ongoing thing. And also, should they all sign up in the portal?
I would say yes. You definitely want to sign up in the portal. We do have a lot of events, but with COVID right now, it's a little bit difficult to predict, what the future looks like as far as events and how those are going to be handled. We do have food services in our Lynn facility that is under contract. But I think, again, with COVID and the way we work, one of the things that's changing rapidly for us is how we do business and how we work. And we're taking a hard look at that. So how we provision food or services to folks working and when they're working, I think is something we'll be taking a look at. Both catering, meetings and events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get to go to some events that Eastern Bank hosts, and I can tell you that they do diversify the menu quite well, and it's often pretty good. I know I don't need to cook dinner when I go home that night when I'm going to an Eastern Bank event. So another question regarding the financial requirements, and I guess it's a little bit of, can you expand on what that means? And a specific question is, what are some of the sunk costs that could be incorporated into financials based on working with Eastern Bank?
I think when we talk about financial, we just want to know that if someone's providing a service to us, that they're financially stable. So, that's just a little bit of a background check. That's what I really refer to. So that, if we're depending on you for a 5-year contract, we would just want to know you're going to be there for 5 years and can provide the service at the level you've committed to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Quincy, I've seen firsthand the leadership that you personally and Bob have provided within the bank with respect to making sure that this culture permeates the organization. And it's not specifically maybe a question that the buyer audience might be as tuned into, but I think it's important. I'd like to hear you talk about within a large organization, a mid-sized organization that wants to work on increasing their procurement and partnerships. Talk about what it takes within an organization to sort of, move the ship, if you will, towards the kind of culture or the kind of intentional practices that we're hearing about on this call.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So just a couple of things going back, as I mentioned, we've been focused on this and continuing to grow their focus since 2010. I think for a lot of organizations who are just starting this journey, and I'm going to come back to a second on those sort of 3 key things that I talked to other CEOs and presidents about. But it really is, it has to start at the top of the house, right? Because, as Tom mentioned, he reports to the CFO, the purchasing managers, the leaders that are in head of procurement, they report to someone, right? And if the top of the house is establishing the guidelines that this is a priority, and then like we did it here at Eastern, and Tom and Rafal remember this very clearly, when 4 years ago we were going to up our game, my answer was we're setting specific goals for each department on spend. And so, Rafal and Tom went through all the spend again, made sure that we had documentation for what they were spending. We count everything in spend. I think with the exception of utilities, which can't be farmed out, right? Because the idea was let's eliminate the excuses of, well, for example, we have a large core, vendor of which, there's only 2. So they're really, you can't diversify that spend. And my answer was, I don't care, it's staying in, right? It's not 100% of your spend. It's about what you can control. And so we were very methodical, driven from, me at the top of the house to say with all of those different, particularly the 5 largest spend category groups, here's what you've done in the past over the last few years, and this year you're going to do more. Our goal is to do, example, $1 million more to spend this year, and we're going to divvy it up across the 5 of you biggest spend divisions, and then we're going to meet and talk about where you are. The teams like Tom and Rafal are going to review all of the contracts, make sure that we're getting diverse bidders in those contracts. So that's the work that you have to do, and it has to start at the top of the house, because all of those other business leaders who are counting the pennies have to know that they have the support of the C-suite to drive that. And then the 3 things that we talked about earlier that I really highlight is you got to break the contracts up, you got to be willing to spend a little bit more, and you got to be willing to take the risk. And if you don't give that authority to your purchasing teams and your departments, they're never going to make the change, because they're going to try to do what's safe and what costs the least each and every time, unless they understand how important it is. So that's really, I think, the drivers, Jim.
Great. Thank you, Quincy, for that message. And I do want to ask one closing question addressed directly to the small businesses on this call. You've given a lot of tactical advice and answered a lot of questions. But, on the journey of being a small business, particularly a small business owned by a person of color, high level advice to that community as it relates to not just doing business with Eastern Bank, but breaking into, the bigger corporations of Boston. What's your advice to the small businesses listening in?
Well, I would say that, most of our connections happen through the networking events, both through this group and Greater New England, and those are where the opportunities and the relationships are built. And, that isn't someone calling me on the phone. That's shaking someone's hand and saying hello and getting to know them for 5 minutes and hearing a little bit about what they're doing. I think that is probably the best door opener that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And I think to that point, to Tom's point, it is about creating those networks, and that's what these programs are about, because minority businesses haven't been able to break into these networks. And so, I applaud the work that's being done at the chamber. This work is happening with other chambers across the Commonwealth now as well, which is tremendous, because, we are in a moment in this country that is turning into a movement that realizes we have to create greater equity in our communities. And that includes businesses and businesses of color and women-owned businesses here in the Commonwealth. And so while I know you sort of felt like you've been beating your head against the wall, there's a sort of glass ceiling ahead, above you. This is a moment when corporations are willing to listen more than they've ever been willing to listen. And so, first of all, they're already here. We're working on sharing. I think this is the goal of the Pacesetters program, Jim, is to share the experiences that you've had with the diverse suppliers with other businesses, so that they have that sort of recommendation. I know, we used Herbie as an example, but I did that with a nonprofit board that I was sitting on, who said they were looking for some security services, and I said, hey, I got somebody for you, because they were doing business with us here at Eastern Bank. And so think broadly too about how to leverage the relationships that you connect, even beyond the company that they're with. There may be other networks like that example that they're part of.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you for a very informative session, Rafal, Tom, Quincy. Really, we appreciate it. And I know that I and others learned a lot on this call. Thank you once again to Eastern Bank. I'll end where I began. There would not be a Pacesetters program but for Eastern Bank and the leadership of Bob Rivers and Quincy. So thank you again for that. Before I go, I want to highlight a couple of upcoming events. On February 22nd, we will have another Doing Business With event featuring Mass General Brigham, formerly known as Partners. So tune in, especially those of you interested in doing business in our hospital community. Should be an interesting event as well. You can register for that event in all chamber programs at bostonchamber.com. Once again, thank you to my friends at Eastern Bank. Thank you to all who participated. Thank you to my team, Baya and Luz and Ben and others who organize programs like this, as well as lead the Pacesetters program. And have a great night, everybody. And we're signing off. Bye.